Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creative Writing with Dr. Nagel. I'm your host, Tanya Nagel, and today we're going to be talking about name calling. In the author world, we know this as pseudonyms. To get started, we're going to cover what a pseudonym is, and then we're going to talk about the reasons you may want to have one, the strategies for choosing one, all the decisions that come along with it, and then we'll wrap up with a conclusion. So, what is a pseudonym? The dictionary definition is a fictitious name, especially one used by an author. So, this is very common in the writing world, and many people have operated under a pseudonym for many, many years. You may also hear this called a pen name, an alias, or if you want to get fancy, a nom de plume. What are some reasons people might want a pseudonym? Well, employers, family, friends, community, subject, and that's the subject that you're writing about. Your name has already been taken. Likability, genre confusion, and because you want to. So let's break that down a little bit more. So let's talk about employers. I began my writing career at the same time I was teaching in colleges and universities, and I did not want my adult students picking up my contemporary erotica because it would have been easily accessible for them to find. I didn't want them to confuse the Dr. Nagel standing in front of them teaching them, freshman, sophomore English or literature, and Kara North, which is my author name, and all of the smut-tastic things that I write. So to keep my employers and my students a little oblivious and to keep my work situation separate, I had a pseudonym. Family. In the same vein of keeping my students away from it, I have lots and lots of family, and their views range from the highly conservative to the extremely liberal, and they have lots of children. And of course, if they find out that I write a book, they're going to want to read it. So I had to keep that separate so that I didn't have people who were too young to be accessing my books looking for them. Friends, again, your friends may or may not be on board with whatever it is that you're writing. There's lots of weird misconceptions that people have if they don't read a genre, and it just keeps the questions at bay if you're not going to tell them that you're writing. It's something that you're doing personally, for yourself. The community, again, the wild accusations and confusion over someone who writes fiction versus the characters that are in the fiction. It's sometimes alarming, I'm going to be honest with you, but some people can't separate what you write from who you are. So I can't imagine what it must be like to be, Stephen King, for example, when it comes to those people who can't separate what he writes and who he is. The subject, which is again where we come right in, and what I just mentioned about New York Times bestselling author Stephen King many times over, is the subject. So if you are writing something that the majority of the people that you are friends with, share community projects with, had babysitting each other's children or whatever, if those people are not likely to be okay with you writing horror or murder mystery or erotica or romance or just whatever, then the subject could be the reason why you need a pen name, again, to keep your author self and your actual self a little bit separate. And then there's the case that your name might already be taken. Now, for Tanya Nagel, there is another Tanya Nagel out there that's a writer, and I had the privilege of meeting her in a group as Kara North, which is interesting because there is a Kara North out there who is an educational designer. And what's funny about this is that I chose Kara North because I lived in North Carolina, and I'll get into that later. And it would be easy to remember. And my day job is as an instructional designer. So it's kind of funny that someone out there named Tanya Nagel ended up writing romance, and someone out there as Kara North is an instructional designer, where in my life that is the exact opposite. Tanya Nagel is an instructional designer, and I write fiction as Kara North. So your name may be taken, and you might have to switch it up if you have a common name. That happens sometimes. Likability. Maybe your parents weren't that kind when naming you. I don't know how else to say that, but you know, if you have a name that's going to be difficult, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it, but is it going to be a name that's likable? If you don't like your name, then chances are your readers aren't going to follow it either. Genre confusion. Maybe you pick names because you have different genres that you write in, and I will definitely get into that because I have several pen names at this point. I started with one and now I have 3. And then, there's the simple fact that because you want to, it's not an obligation to use a pseudonym, and you can certainly not use a pseudonym, but maybe you want to, and that is totally fine because authors have been doing that since the beginning of publishing. So let's look at some strategies. If you've decided I'm going to use a pen name, you would be in good company. So Samuel Clemens is the real name for Mark Twain. Agatha Christie is Mary Westmacott. True story. Stanley Lieber, that's Stan Lee. Joanne Rowling, J.K. Rowling. Chloe Ardelia Wolford is the amazing Toni Morrison. So take a look through here. Pablo Neruda is an amazing poet and storyteller, but you can see how putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names on a book cover might have been the reason he decided to break that down into 2. Alice Sheldon writes as James Tiptree, and sometimes when you are writing in specific genres, there are men who write under women's names because, or what would be perceived as a woman's name, because it's romance and those things, and that's becoming less and less of a thing, right? Like it's becoming a lot easier for men to just write romance because they have a passion for writing romance, just as it is getting a lot easier for women to write in, say, science fiction and fantasy because they enjoy writing in science fiction and fantasy and not having to use a gender tipping name. But until recently, it has very much been the case that people would write under a different name that would make them seem, or would hide their gender, because the readers might not pick it up if they thought that a man was writing that romance or that a woman was writing that sci-fi or fantasy. And then there is Anne Rice. Again, we've got a 4-name, Howard Allen Francis O'Brien. Look it up. She was named after a relative, so yeah, that became Anne Rice. And then Yukio Mishima is another easier to pronounce name than Kimitaki Hirakoya. So, thinking about all of these authors who are critically acclaimed, what kind of pen name can you come up with, and how do you even come up with that? So, do some brainstorming. Start looking all around. Write down names of things that you like, companies that you like. There's nothing wrong. Maybe if you're going to write young adult and you remember when you were a kid and maybe a product that you used all the time and you like that name, so maybe that's going to be, your name. Do a poll. Like, once you get a couple ideas out there, poll your potential readers. So if you're an established author, set out that poll to see, what those readers like or don't like. If you are not an established author, pick the people that know your writing and poll them. Like, here's some choices. What do you think? Maybe you're going to use the name you wanted but didn't get when you were born. That is that is a popular way. I believe that is part of Anne Rice's case. There is that she was named after relatives, and she kind of wanted a different name, so she was able to do that with the fiction. Genre based, again, like I was saying before, lots of people have altered their name based on the genre. If you notice, a lot of science fiction and fantasy, there's initials, right? So George R.R. Martin, they J.K. Rowling, right? So it's common when you go to a bookstore and scan the sci-fi fantasy shelves to see authors with just initials. And that is a very gender neutralizing approach to writing whatever you want. But it's also genre based. Like, that's something common within that genre. So go through and take a look through the bookstore and see what kind of names are you noticing. Are there trends in the genre that you would like to write in? Use anagrams. So maybe your name, could stand for something else. It could be backwards. Use a name generator. Nothing wrong with that. And then baby name books and websites are also great ways to get lost down the rabbit hole of finding your ideal pen name. So now that you've found this author name that you're going to be using, it's time to make some decisions, because this is going to be a long-term decision for you, or you're going to end up like those bands that keep changing their name, right? And then no one knows who they are unless they hit it big. And then none of their prior music works because they didn't make it under that band name that made it big. So this is going to be something that sticks with you pretty much for the rest of your life. So I've been Tanya Nagel since getting married, and I've been Kara North for over 18 years now. And that pen name is not something I could easily merge and just go back through and strip everything down and then put it back up as Tanya Nagel. Nobody would be looking for that. No one would buy it. None of my readers that are established that look for Kara North are going to suddenly start looking for Tanya Nagel. So once you start putting a book out under that name and you start getting readers, you're, like you're grown folks, right? You don't have to be stuck with it, but you're kind of stuck with it unless you want to rebuild your brand from the ground up again. So the ease of use, how easy is it for you to use that name? Is there anything that you're going to regret when it comes to your legacy? And when you're an author, so you're going to have plenty of regrets, trust me. But how is it going to fit in with your brand? Are you going to remember to answer to that name if you are on the other side of a table at a book signing and then you go to get water and somebody calls out for you to grab them a bottle or to grab them a cup and you don't answer because that's not your name? This is your brand. So whatever name you decide to go with, keep that in mind. So some ways to also think about it is, who is your target reader, those demographics and those genres. So if you're writing comedy or satire, you can go with a funny pen name or a little more risque or fun name. But if you are writing for a consistent reader base that is going to be looking for it, unless you are going to always be writing comedy and satire, you may end up with more than one pen name because your other readers aren't going to pick that up. I like to use the book 50 Shades of Chicken by J.A. Fowler. Get it? Chicken, Fowler. And it's the like the satire cookbook for 50 Shades of Grey. But I will say that the cookbook is hilarious, so it is well worth a read. And I get nothing for promoting or plugging any of these authors or books. That it just is. But J.A. Fowler is that's a made up name that was put for that cookbook, and those change if you ever look at those cookbooks or you look at those types of comedy and lighthearted reads. They switch up based on the title of the book. The author's name usually has something to do with that. So keep that in mind also, is the demographics of who you're writing for and the genre. How are they going to feel about that name? Are they going to relate to it, or are they going to hate it? Is someone already using it? Is it someone's real name? Is it someone's pen name? It's a lot easier to go ahead and take it as an author if it's someone's real name, because chances are someone else out there, again, I gave you my scenario earlier, has that name. We are not that unique. However, if someone is already out there writing it with their pen name, then you might want to throw an initial or something else in there so that readers don't get confused. Because if you are writing romance and they are writing nonfiction books about the planet, that's going to become a problem. And as far as things go, it's going to be who got it first, right? When it comes to the publishing aspect of things, because I know people personally who have had to go to war, essentially, like legal war, and they lost, even though it was their real name that they were using, and then someone else took their real name and started also publishing under it with just an initial difference. And they essentially said, no, you can't, you don't have copyright over a name. So it's going to be a complicated thing. You are probably going to end up somewhere around someone's real name, unless you're using, some initials and a generator for, the fantasy genre or something like that for the last name. So just keep that in mind. Be sensitive to it. You know, I'm fully aware that, you know, the Kara North that sometimes pops up because I can't get Google to change the the image. She is probably not super thrilled that my books pop up under her name, but I was published long before she was under that name, so those books aren't going anywhere. So now what? You've got your name. Using that new name is more than just putting it on a book cover. You have to be able to identify by that name. If you're going to get out there into the community, if you're going to put yourself up on social media, if you are going to go to book signings and other events, you are going to be living by that name. Because I now have 3 pseudonyms, I have Kara North, September North, and Echo North, I have a logo for all 3 of them. It's a small, you know, initial type logo. They sort of go in line, you know, as a theme themselves, and all 3 of them are on a banner in order for people to know at a book signing. You're looking for adult romance 18 and over, that goes under the Kara North banner. If you're looking for young adult for mature readers, you know, 16 and over, you're looking at September North. If you're looking for non-romantic fiction in the fantasy and sci-fi genre, that is under Echo North. And then if you're looking for nonfiction, that's under me, Tanya Nagel. So I often will wear a shirt that has my logos on it when I'm at an event for a signing. I definitely make sure that I have signage so that people can find the right version of me, because obviously I'm only one person. So unless I am going to a specific convention or a specific book signing that is only for that genre. So if I went to a young adult book signing, then I wouldn't bring Kara North and I wouldn't bring Echo North. I would just bring September North. And then I would only have to be September North at that event. So think about what it is now that you have it and what you're going to do with it, because it is way more than just putting your name on a book cover. And so in review, what is a pseudonym? It is the name that is not your own or some variation of your own that you've chosen to use for your writing persona and personality. There are several reasons why you can use one, why you may choose to use one. Your reasons are your own. Whether you use one or you don't, you owe no justification to anyone except for the IRS if you're in America, because they are going to want to know that is your where you're getting some taxable income, because it is essentially your job. It becomes your business name. And then strategies for picking one, that can be anything from looking at the products on the shelves in the grocery stores all the way to asking your friends and family, or maybe naming yourself after someone from, you know, your past and your family line. And then once you've made those decisions, check out what it's like to set up a small business, because even though it's a person's name, it is essentially becoming your brand name. And along with becoming a writer, you're becoming a small business owner. As soon as you hit publish and you start earning income on that work, you start becoming subject to tax laws. So regardless of where you are or what name you put on the book, in order for you to get paid, they're going to need all your real banking information, and that's where they're going to send the taxable documents to. So that is a complete other show that we'll talk about in the future, but things to think about and know when it comes to those decisions that you're making. You can find more on creativewritingwithdrnagel.com. I am in the process of making that website better and providing more, but I'm doing it myself, so bear with me. You can also join me in the Creative Writing with Dr. Nagel Facebook group and listen to the podcast, and obviously you can come back for lots of author interviews and more tips for writing here on the YouTube channel. Thank you and have a great day.